The little girl walked into the music room feeling her stomach twist into knots. The morning sun was streaming through the windows, lighting up the rows of shiny pianos that lined the walls. The room smelled faintly of polish and old wood. It should have felt warm and inviting, a place where music could flow freely. But today, it felt heavy and full of tension. Her small hands were clammy, and she kept shifting the strap of her backpack on her shoulder, hoping that no one would notice how nervous she was. She had been practicing at home for weeks. Every day after school, she would sit at her own piano, carefully moving her fingers over the keys, trying to remember every note, every pause, every small detail that the music required. She loved playing. When her fingers danced across the keys, she felt free, like she could float away from everything that worried her. But here, in front of the teacher and the other students, the freedom vanished. She could feel every eye on her, waiting, watching, judging. The teacher was already standing at the front of the room, her eyes sharp, scanning the students as if she could see every thought inside their heads. She had a reputation for being strict, and the students often whispered about how she could be harsh when someone made a mistake. The girl had seen it before, not to her directly, but to others, and it made her stomach tighten. Today, it seemed she was the one in the spotlight. Her classmates were sitting quietly, their attention divided between the piano, their own notebooks, and the nervous energy that filled the room. Some of them were excited, some scared, and some just curious to see what would happen. The little girl felt their eyes like tiny weights pressing on her shoulders, making it harder to move or even breathe. She wished she could shrink down, disappear into the corner, and just listen to the other kids play. But the teacher's voice cut through the room like a sudden gust of wind. "Step forward," the teacher said, her tone sharp and commanding. "It's time for you to play." The girl's heart raced. She wanted to say she wasn't ready, that she needed more time, but the words wouldn't come out. Her feet felt heavy as she walked toward the piano, each step echoing in the silent room. The closer she got, the more she could see the expectant faces of her classmates, and the fear bubbled up inside her like it might spill over. She sat down on the piano bench, her legs swinging slightly because they didn't reach the floor. She placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. The teacher leaned over slightly, her eyes narrowing, as if to remind the girl that she was being watched, that she could not falter. The little girl felt a sudden surge of panic. What if she hit the wrong note? What if she stumbled? What if everyone laughed at her? Her mind flashed back to the times she had practiced alone in her room. She remembered the gentle hum of the music filling the space around her, how it had made her feel like she belonged to something beautiful and endless. Here, that feeling was gone, replaced by the cold weight of expectation. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to picture the warm light of her own room, the feeling of her fingers gliding over the keys without anyone watching. Opening her eyes, she glanced at the sheet music in front of her. The notes stared back, precise and unyielding. She knew them all, but under the pressure, they seemed to shift and change, like a puzzle that kept moving when she tried to solve it. Her fingers hovered above the keys, hesitant, trembling slightly. The teacher's gaze felt heavier now, pressing down on her like a silent command. She had to play, and she had to play well. She began slowly, the first few notes awkward and shaky. She could hear the faint whispers of her classmates, some curious, some impatient. But she forced herself to focus on the sound, on the rhythm, on the music itself. She remembered the lessons she had learned at home. Breathe, feel, let your hands guide you. She tried to push the fear out of her mind, to make space for the music to flow. The first few notes were hesitant, slightly uneven. Her fingers fumbled, hesitated, and then moved again. She felt the heat rise to her cheeks, but she kept going. Each note was a battle, each chord a small victory. The teacher's eyes remained on her, sharp and unyielding, but the girl began to feel a small spark of confidence. She could do this. She had practiced. She knew the music. Slowly, the notes began to sound better. Her fingers found the keys with more certainty. The trembling in her hands lessened, replaced by a growing sense of control. She was no longer just a girl being forced to play. She was a musician, telling a story through the piano, letting the music carry her through the fear. The room seemed to fade around her, the other students' faces blurring, leaving only the sound and the keys beneath her fingers. The teacher's expression didn't change, but the girl could sense a shift in the room. The whispers stopped. The curious stares became still, attentive. For the first time, she felt like she was truly being heard, like the music was reaching everyone in the classroom. The pressure had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something she could use, something that fueled her focus instead of holding her back. With each measure, she grew more confident. Her fingers moved with a rhythm that surprised even her. She remembered how she had spent countless evenings practicing, how she had wanted to make the music come alive. Now she was doing it. The sound of the piano was no longer just notes on a page. It was a story, a message, a declaration that she was capable, strong, and talented. She glanced briefly at the teacher, who was still watching, but now there was something different in her eyes. It was not the smirk or the satisfaction she had expected. There was a pause, a quiet acknowledgement, though subtle, that the girl was doing something remarkable. The little girl felt a surge of pride. She had not allowed fear to control her. She had turned a moment meant to embarrass her into an opportunity to shine. The last notes of the piece lingered in the air, soft and resonant. The girl's hands hovered above the keys for a moment, catching her breath, feeling the energy of the room around her. Her heart was still racing, but it was a different kind of excitement now, one of accomplishment, one of quiet triumph. She had faced the challenge and she had not failed. Her classmates slowly began to clap, some quietly at first, then with more enthusiasm. The sound of their applause wrapped around her like a warm blanket, easing the tension in her shoulders. The teacher's eyes softened just slightly, a small acknowledgement that the girl had surprised everyone, including herself. For that brief moment, the room felt lighter, warmer, full of possibility. She stepped away from the piano, feeling a mixture of relief and exhilaration. The weight that had been pressing down on her was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence she had never known before. Today had started as a moment of fear, a moment designed to shame her, but it had transformed into something entirely different. She had discovered a strength she didn't know she had, a power in her talent and her courage that could not be taken away. As she returned to her seat, she could still hear the echoes of her performance in the room, and a small smile formed on her face. She had faced the challenge, she had played through the fear, and she had done it with grace. The day had begun with nervous steps and shaky notes, but it ended with a quiet triumph that would stay with her for a long time. She knew that the music was hers, and no one could ever take that away. The girl sat at the piano bench, her fingers still hovering above the keys as the room settled into an uneasy silence. The first part of the song had passed, and she could feel the weight of every eye in the classroom resting on her shoulders. Her heart was still pounding, a mixture of fear and excitement coursing through her. She knew the next part of the piece was more complicated, filled with faster notes and tricky transitions that required focus and precision. The thought made her stomach flutter nervously, but she took a slow, steady breath to calm herself. The teacher, standing at the front of the room, watched her with a sharp gaze. It was clear that the teacher expected mistakes, hoping that the girl would falter. The little girl could feel the tension, a kind of invisible pressure pressing down on her hands. She shook it off as best she could, telling herself that she had practiced this piece countless times, that her fingers remembered what to do even if her mind felt jittery. Her classmates remained quiet, the air thick with anticipation. Some of them leaned forward in their chairs, trying to catch every movement of her hands. Others looked around nervously, unsure of what to expect. The girl tried not to think about them. She focused only on the keys in front of her, on the music, on the rhythm she had memorized. She pressed down on the keys and the next section began. The notes came faster now, tumbling one after another. Her fingers danced across the piano with increasing confidence, each key finding its place without hesitation. The music seemed to flow through her, like it had a life of its own, and she let herself be carried by it. Her nervousness started to fade, replaced by a growing sense of control and determination. The teacher's face showed no emotion, but the girl could sense a subtle change in the room. The whispers and restless shuffling of students disappeared, replaced by focused attention. Everyone was listening, watching, and she realized they were starting to notice her skill. The confidence that had seemed so far away moments ago was now growing inside her, spreading through her chest and arms, guiding her hands across the keys. She reached the most challenging part of the piece, a section that required precise timing and careful attention to dynamics. She had practiced this over and over at home, often stumbling until she got it right. Now, under the bright classroom lights and the watchful eyes of her teacher, she faced it head-on. Her fingers moved quickly and accurately, striking the correct keys with a clarity that made the notes sing. Every chord and every note sounded as it should, resonant and full of emotion. The girl felt a thrill as she realized she was not only keeping up, but she was excelling. The music was no longer just a sequence of notes. It was a story, a voice, a way for her to express herself. She poured everything she felt into the performance. The nervousness, the fear, the excitement, and the pride. Her hands moved with confidence, her heart in rhythm with the melody, and her mind completely focused on the music. Her classmates were leaning forward now, their eyes wide with admiration. Some of them whispered softly to each other, amazed at how the girl had transformed the room with her talent. She noticed it but didn't let it distract her. Instead, she let the energy from their reactions flow through her, fueling her performance. She could feel the power of the music carrying her, lifting her above the anxiety she had felt just moments ago. The teacher, who had been waiting for a mistake, seemed to hesitate. The sharp look in the eyes had softened slightly, replaced with a flicker of surprise. The little girl noticed it but did not falter. She kept her focus entirely on the piano, letting the music guide her fingers. Each note rang out clearly, each chord resonated, and the difficult section passed flawlessly under her hands. The rhythm shifted again, moving into a slower, more expressive part of the piece. This was where the emotion of the music truly came alive, and the girl let herself feel it. Her fingers caressed the keys, pressing down with care and sensitivity. The notes lingered in the room, soft and powerful at the same time, creating a gentle wave that washed over her classmates and the teacher alike. There was a quiet awe in the room, a shared recognition that what was unfolding was special. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the music take control, feeling the story within it come alive. The classroom, the students, the teacher all seemed to fade around her. There was only the piano, the notes, and the expression of her own heart through the melody. She realized that she was not just performing. She was communicating something deeply personal, something that could be felt even without words. The fear that had gripped her earlier now seemed distant, replaced by a sense of freedom and power she had never experienced before. The teacher leaned back slightly, arms crossed, watching the girl with a thoughtful expression. It was as if the teacher was processing what was happening, recognizing the talent that had been underestimated. The girl felt a small surge of pride, but she did not let it distract her. She kept playing, letting every note be precise, expressive, and full of energy. As she moved toward the final measures of the piece, the music built in intensity. The notes became faster, more complex, and yet her fingers navigated them with grace and ease. The room seemed to vibrate with the sound, the energy building until it reached a powerful climax. She could feel the excitement in the air, the admiration of her classmates, and the subtle acknowledgement from her teacher. Every ounce of practice, every moment of fear and doubt, had led to this moment. Then, just as she had practiced countless times at home, she reached the final chord. Her hands held the keys for a brief moment, letting the last note resonate throughout the room. The silence that followed was almost tangible, filled with anticipation. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Next, her chest heaved with relief and exhilaration. She had done it. She had played through the fear and performed perfectly. The room erupted in applause, spontaneous and heartfelt. The little girl's classmates cheered, some jumping out of their seats, clapping and smiling. The sound of their admiration wrapped around her, and she felt a warmth spread through her body. It was unlike anything she had experienced before, a feeling of being seen, recognized, and celebrated. Even the teacher, who had been so stern and intimidating moments ago, gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The little girl noticed it, and a quiet smile spread across her face. She stood up from the piano, her legs shaking slightly from the adrenaline and excitement. Her hands tingled from the effort, but it was a good, proud tingling. She had faced a challenge that had felt overwhelming and had turned it into a triumph. She looked around at her classmates, seeing their admiration and excitement, and realized that she had changed the way they saw her. She had proven not only her talent but her courage and determination. As she walked back to her seat, she could feel the energy of the room still buzzing around her. Her heart was still racing, but now it was filled with pride and confidence. The fear that had once gripped her so tightly had been transformed into a strength she could feel in every step, every breath, every heartbeat. Today had started as a moment of anxiety and potential humiliation, but it had turned into a story of triumph, skill, and inner strength. The girl knew she would remember this moment for the rest of her life, a turning point where fear had been conquered, and her true ability had shone through. The applause was still echoing softly in the room as the little girl remained at her seat for a moment, catching her breath. She felt a strange mixture of relief and exhilaration, her heart still racing from the performance. Her classmates' faces were lit up with admiration and excitement, some whispering to each other about how impressive her playing had been. Even the teacher, who had been so strict and intimidating, appeared different now, more thoughtful, less sharp, as if she had seen something unexpected in the girl's performance. The girl's hands tingled from the effort, and she flexed her fingers, letting the energy of the music linger in her. She realized that the fear she had carried into the classroom had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something stronger. It had become determination, confidence, and a quiet pride that she could feel in every movement and thought. She understood, in a deep and sudden way, that she had the power to face challenges and turn them into moments of success. The teacher cleared her throat and walked closer to the piano, her steps deliberate and measured. There was a moment of tension in the air, a brief pause as everyone waited to see what she would say or do next. The girl's stomach fluttered nervously again, unsure if the teacher would criticize, praise, or remain silent. But when the teacher finally spoke, her voice was different than before. Calm, even, without the sharp edge that had made the girl so anxious earlier. "That was impressive," the teacher said, her eyes briefly meeting the girl's. It was not the usual kind of praise, not exaggerated or overly dramatic, but it carried weight because it came from someone who had been known to be strict and critical. The girl felt a small warmth spread through her chest, a sense of recognition that she had not expected but deeply appreciated. Her classmates shifted in their seats, some smiling, some nodding in agreement. They could see the change in the teacher's demeanor and realized that the girl's performance had made a lasting impression. The room was filled with a quiet energy, a mixture of admiration, respect, and curiosity. The girl felt the weight of it all, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt inspired. The music had become more than just notes and rhythms. It had become a bridge between her and everyone else in the room. As the class continued, the teacher asked the girl to perform another short piece, something simpler but still expressive. The girl's hands trembled slightly as she approached the piano again, but she remembered the feeling of the last performance. The way the music had carried her, the way the energy of the room had shifted, the way she had discovered her own strength. She sat down, took a deep breath, and let her fingers find the keys. This time, there was no hesitation. The notes flowed smoothly, gracefully, as if they were a natural extension of her own thoughts and emotions. She felt the story within the music, the emotions that she had sometimes struggled to express through words, coming alive through her playing. The room seemed to respond, every sound resonating with clarity and emotion, capturing the attention of everyone present. Her classmates watched in awe, leaning forward, captivated by the confidence and skill she displayed. They could see that this was no longer a nervous child being pushed to perform. This was someone who had found her voice through music, someone who could express herself with power and grace. Even the teacher, who had initially intended to embarrass her, now seemed captivated, her expression a mix of surprise and appreciation. As the girl played, she noticed subtle shifts in the room. The usual distractions, the whispers, the fidgeting, the impatient looks had vanished. Everyone was focused entirely on the music, and she could feel their attention as a kind of energy that carried her forward. It was exhilarating, empowering, and a little overwhelming, but in a way that made her want to play even more passionately. The music moved from gentle, flowing passages to more dramatic, expressive sections, each note carrying emotion and intensity. The girl felt herself becoming fully immersed in the experience, her mind and body synchronized with the rhythm and melody. She was no longer playing simply to meet expectations or avoid embarrassment. She was playing to express herself, to share something deeply personal, and to connect with everyone in the room through the universal language of music. Time seemed to stretch and bend as she continued to perform. She lost track of the minutes, the classroom, and the people around her, focusing entirely on the sounds, the keys, and the emotions she was conveying. Each phrase of music was like a breath, a heartbeat, a story unfolding. She felt the joy, the tension, and the release in each measure, and she let it guide her fingers and her spirit. When she finally reached the end of the piece, the last note lingered in the air like a soft echo, filling the room with a sense of completion and awe. She let her hands rest lightly on the keys, breathing deeply, feeling the surge of accomplishment and the quiet power that came from expressing herself fully. The silence that followed was almost sacred, as if everyone in the room were holding their breath to honor what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started quietly, tentative, and then grew into a strong, heartfelt expression of admiration and appreciation. The girl looked up at her classmates and saw their smiles, their excitement, and their recognition. She felt a profound sense of connection, knowing that the music had reached them, had moved them, had created a shared experience that they would all remember. The teacher approached her once again, her steps deliberate and measured. There was a softness in her expression now, a subtle acknowledgement that the girl had surpassed all expectations. She nodded slightly, a gesture that carried more meaning than words could convey. The girl felt a surge of pride, but it was tempered by humility, a quiet understanding that the recognition she received was a reflection not only of her skill, but also of the courage it had taken to face her fear. As the class continued, the teacher encouraged the girl to demonstrate different techniques, explore new melodies, and experiment with expression. The girl felt a renewed sense of excitement and curiosity. She realized that the music was not just about performing correctly. It was about discovering herself, her abilities, and her capacity to convey emotion and tell stories through sound. Her classmates were inspired by her performance. Some of them approached the piano afterwards, eager to try their own pieces with the same confidence and passion. The atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. What had begun as a tense, anxious environment had transformed into a space of creativity, encouragement, and shared enthusiasm for music. The girl felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. She was part of something larger than herself, a community of learners and listeners connected through the power of music. She understood, in a deep and lasting way, that talent and courage could open doors, break down walls, and create connections that transcended fear and uncertainty. By the end of the day, she walked out of the classroom with a sense of accomplishment and joy that carried her through the hallways and into the quiet moments of reflection at home. She thought about the challenges she had faced, the fear she had felt, and the strength she had discovered. She realized that the experience had changed her, not only as a musician but as a person, giving her confidence, resilience, and a sense of pride that would stay with her forever. The little girl sat quietly at the piano, her hands resting lightly on the keys as the classroom buzzed with energy. The applause from her previous performance still lingered in the air, and she could feel the warm glow of pride spreading through her chest. It was a feeling she had never experienced so strongly before, a mix of relief, excitement, and the quiet confidence that came from overcoming fear. She could see her classmates whispering to each other, exchanging looks of surprise and admiration, and she knew that she had made a lasting impression. The teacher approached her once more, stepping closer to the piano with a thoughtful expression. There was no hint of the harshness that had filled the room earlier, no trace of the intention to embarrass. Instead, the teacher's presence seemed different, more measured, more reflective. The girl could feel the weight of attention again, but this time it was not filled with fear. It was filled with opportunity. She had proven herself capable, and now it felt like the moment had shifted in her favor. The teacher spoke softly, yet clearly, asking her to try a different piece, one that required not just skill but emotional depth and interpretation. The girl nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. She had practiced this piece at home many times, but performing it in front of the class added a layer of intensity that made her pulse quicken. She placed her fingers on the keys, taking a deep breath to steady herself, and allowed the music to take over. As the notes began to flow, the girl felt the story within the music coming alive. Each phrase carried emotion, each chord expressed feeling, and each transition reflected her understanding of the piece. Her fingers moved with growing confidence, no longer hesitant but sure, deliberate, and expressive. The room seemed to quiet itself around her, as if the walls were holding their breath to listen. The other students leaned forward, captivated, their usual chatter silenced by the power of her playing. The teacher watched intently, her eyes following each movement of the girl's hands. There was an unmistakable shift in her demeanor, a subtle acknowledgement that the girl was doing something extraordinary. The intended embarrassment had completely disappeared, replaced by admiration and, perhaps, a newfound respect. The little girl felt a surge of pride, not in a boastful way, but as a quiet understanding that she had faced a challenge and had triumphed. The music became more complex as the piece progressed, moving from gentle, flowing passages to moments of dramatic intensity. The girl's fingers flew across the keys with precision, yet each note was infused with emotion. She felt herself becoming part of the music, as if the piano and the melody were extensions of her own thoughts and feelings. The energy in the room seemed to shift, becoming a shared experience that connected her to every person present. Her classmates were not just observers. They were participants, their attention and admiration feeding back into her performance. She could feel the teacher's eyes on her, sharp but not threatening, analyzing but appreciating. The girl realized that this moment was no longer about fear or judgment. It was about expression, growth, and the beauty of sharing something deeply personal. She allowed herself to feel the music fully, letting the emotions guide her hands and her heart. The room seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the piece, each note resonating not just through the piano, but through the space and the people in it. As she approached the middle of the piece, the music demanded even more focus and control. The tempo increased, the notes became more intricate, and the dynamics shifted rapidly. The girl's fingers moved with agility and precision, guided by both practice and instinct. She felt her heart pounding, not with fear this time, but with the thrill of mastery. Every note she played was a small victory, a testament to the time and effort she had invested in learning and perfecting her skills. Her classmates were completely absorbed, some leaning forward with wide eyes, others quietly mouthing words of encouragement. There was a sense of wonder in their faces, a recognition that they were witnessing something special. The little girl felt a profound connection to them, a silent understanding that music had the power to bridge gaps, to communicate beyond words, and to inspire admiration and respect. The teacher, who had intended to put her on the spot earlier, now seemed to be reconsidering the way she viewed the girl. There was no condescension, no smirk, no expectation of failure. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement of talent, discipline, and courage. The girl noticed it, and it strengthened her resolve to continue performing at her best. She understood that this moment was more than just a lesson in music. It was a lesson in self-confidence, resilience, and the power of perseverance. The final section of the piece approached, a combination of delicate notes and bold, dramatic chords. The girl's hands moved with grace and certainty, each note resonating clearly and confidently. She felt the culmination of her practice, her focus, and her courage converging in this moment. The music flowed naturally, effortlessly, as if it had been waiting for her to bring it to life. The room seemed to hold its breath, and she could feel the collective attention of her classmates and teacher as a tangible energy that propelled her forward. When the last note lingered and finally faded into silence, the girl remained at the piano for a brief moment, letting the resonance settle. The room was still, filled with awe and appreciation. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started quietly, a few hands clapping, then grew into a chorus of admiration and excitement. The girl felt the warmth of recognition envelop her, and a smile spread across her face. She had faced fear, performed under pressure, and had created something beautiful that everyone in the room could feel and appreciate. The teacher stepped forward, her expression softening, a quiet acknowledgement in her eyes. She nodded, a subtle gesture of respect and recognition for the girl's talent and perseverance. The girl felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from praise alone, but from the knowledge that she had faced a challenge, turned it into an opportunity, and emerged stronger, more confident, and more self-assured. As the class continued, the teacher encouraged the girl to explore different techniques, experiment with new melodies, and share her insights with her classmates. The atmosphere in the room had transformed completely. What had begun as a moment of tension, anxiety, and potential embarrassment had become a space of creativity, encouragement, and shared appreciation for music. The girl felt a sense of belonging and connection that was new and exhilarating. Her classmates, inspired by her performance, began to engage with their own music more passionately. Some approached the piano, others shared ideas and encouragement, and the entire room seemed to hum with the energy of creativity and learning. The little girl realized that her courage, talent, and dedication had not only changed the way she was seen, but had also transformed the energy and spirit of the entire class. By the end of the session, the girl walked out of the classroom with a heart full of pride and confidence. She had faced a challenge that had seemed daunting, performed under pressure, and shared something deeply personal with others. She felt stronger, more self-assured, and more connected to those around her. The experience had been more than just a lesson in music. It had been a lesson in courage, perseverance, and the power of self-expression. The little girl sat quietly at her desk, her mind still replaying the events of the day. She could hardly believe what had happened. The fear and anxiety she had felt just hours ago had transformed into pride, confidence, and a sense of accomplishment. The piano in the classroom, once a source of nervousness and pressure, had become a tool for self-expression and a way to show everyone, including herself, what she was capable of. The applause, the admiration of her classmates, and even the acknowledgement from the teacher felt surreal, yet deeply rewarding. As the teacher gave her some final words of encouragement, the girl realized that the experience had been more than just a lesson in playing the piano. It had taught her about courage, about facing challenges head-on, and about the power of perseverance. She had felt fear, but she had not let it control her. She had felt pressure, but she had used it to focus and improve. And in the end, she had created something beautiful that everyone could feel and appreciate. Her classmates approached her, some with shy smiles, others with excited questions about how she had played so well. They wanted to know how she had stayed so calm, how she had managed to perform under such pressure. The girl smiled back, feeling a sense of connection with each of them. She realized that her courage had inspired not only herself but also those around her. The energy in the room, the shared excitement and admiration, had created a bond between them that went beyond simple friendship. It was a bond forged through respect and shared experience. The teacher, who had initially intended to embarrass her, now stood silently observing the reactions of the students. There was a subtle change in the teacher's demeanor, a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes talent and determination could surprise even the most skeptical observer. The little girl noticed this shift and felt a quiet satisfaction. She had faced someone who had expected her to fail and had turned the situation into an opportunity to shine. It was a powerful lesson, one that would stay with her long after she left the classroom. As the day went on, the girl thought about how the experience had changed her perspective on challenges. She realized that fear and anxiety were not weaknesses, but signals that something important was happening. They were opportunities to grow, to test her abilities, and to discover her own strength. She understood that the classroom, the teacher, and even the potential embarrassment had been part of a larger lesson, one that had taught her resilience, confidence, and the value of persistence. The girl reflected on the practice sessions she had spent at home, the hours of dedication, the moments of frustration, and the small victories she had celebrated along the way. All of that preparation had come together in a single performance, a moment that had seemed overwhelming at first but had turned into a defining experience. She understood that hard work, focus, and determination were just as important as talent, and that they could transform fear into achievement. She also thought about her classmates and how they had reacted. Their admiration, their curiosity, and their encouragement had been part of the experience. She realized that sharing her abilities with others was not just about recognition. It was about inspiring and connecting with people. The music had created a bridge between her and the class, a way to communicate beyond words, and it had shown her that expressing herself fully could have a profound impact on others. The little girl felt a deep sense of gratitude. She was grateful for the challenge, for the pressure, and even for the initial fear she had experienced. Without those elements, she might not have discovered the depth of her own talent and courage. She was grateful for her practice, her perseverance, and the support, even if indirect, from those around her. And she was grateful for the music itself, which had given her a voice, a way to express her emotions and connect with others in a powerful and meaningful way. As the classroom emptied and the final moments of the day approached, the girl took one last look at the piano. It no longer felt intimidating or overwhelming. Instead, it felt like a companion, a partner in her journey, and a reminder of the growth she had achieved. She touched the keys lightly, feeling the smooth surface under her fingers, and remembered the journey that had brought her to this point. The nervous steps into the classroom, the trembling hands, the initial mistakes, and the eventual triumph. Walking out of the classroom, the girl felt a sense of pride and confidence that stayed with her long after she left the school. She knew that the experience had changed her in fundamental ways. She had learned that facing challenges, even when they seemed daunting or unfair, could reveal hidden strengths and abilities. She had discovered that fear could be transformed into determination, and that pressure could be channeled into focus and expression. As she moved through the hallways, she noticed her classmates glancing at her with admiration and curiosity. Some approached her, asking questions, others smiled quietly, acknowledging her performance in their own way. She felt a sense of connection with all of them, knowing that her courage and talent had inspired and touched those around her. It was a powerful realization, one that filled her with a sense of purpose and belonging. Later, as she reflected on the day at home, she thought about the lessons she had learned beyond music. She understood the importance of preparation, focus, and perseverance. She realized that talent alone was not enough. It had to be combined with dedication and courage. She recognized that challenges, even those meant to intimidate or embarrass, could be opportunities for growth and self-discovery. And she felt a deep sense of confidence in her ability to face future challenges, both in music and in life. The little girl also recognized the value of expressing herself through music. She had experienced firsthand how it could communicate emotions, create connections, and inspire admiration and respect. She understood that her abilities were not just for herself, but for sharing with others, creating moments of beauty, and building bonds of understanding and appreciation. As she prepared for the next day, she felt a renewed sense of excitement and curiosity. She was eager to continue learning, practicing, and exploring the piano, knowing that each challenge could be an opportunity for growth. She understood that the journey of learning and self-expression was ongoing, filled with moments of triumph, discovery, and inspiration. The day had started with fear and uncertainty, but it ended with confidence, pride, and a sense of accomplishment. The little girl had faced a situation designed to embarrass her, and had transformed it into a moment of triumph and inspiration. She had discovered her own strength, the power of perseverance, and the beauty of sharing her talents with others. And she knew that this experience would stay with her forever, guiding her in music, in life, and in the way she approached every challenge that came her way.